Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this sunny Tuesday for an overview of the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Federal R&D funding programs. Let's see a little bit about myself. My name is John Uveri. I'm the SBIR Program Specialist at the Small Business and Technology Development Center. I am a longtime member of the technology commercialization team within the SBTDC. I joined the organization back in 2001 after I had graduated from the MBA program, the full-time MBA program at Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem. Prior to that, I was a health science contractor for a mid-sized company up in the Washington, D.C. area. And prior to that, I was at the University of Virginia doing my undergraduate degree. So I've very much appreciated my time here at the SBTDC and have had the great opportunity to work with literally hundreds and hundreds of early stage companies, many of which you are in the position of right now. Just to let you know, we are indeed recording this session. We will send this information out to you after completion of the session today. I also want to let you know that I am part of a team of 4 in the SBTDC that is focused on commercialization of technologies and innovations. So fasten your seatbelts. We've got a lot of information to cover in a relatively short period of time. Again, recording will be available, so you don't have to feel free to furiously take notes. But we've got a lot of great information that I'm happy to share with you today. So a little bit of a rundown of the topics that we're going to cover. We're going to talk about stage-specific funding needs and sources of those funding specifically for research and development, innovative-based technology development type companies. We'll discuss the SBIR and STTR grant and contract programs. So we'll give an overview of what those programs look like. We'll talk about the particular federal agencies that participate in both the SBIR and STTR programs. We'll chat about some what we call pre-proposal homework, things that you can do before you actually start to develop an actual proposal document that will help you in terms of increasing your competitiveness so that you've got a strong proposal when you do start to draft that proposal. We'll talk about a multi-product, multi-submission strategy. So one of the very nice things about the SBIR STTR programs is that you can use it multiple times. This is not a one and done type funding mechanism. You can use it multiple times to fund different development processes that you may want to go through. We'll discuss the budget, use of funds that you will request in your budget when you submit a phase 1 and a phase 2. And we'll also talk about a newly reinstated program that North Carolina offers through the One North Carolina Small Business Program. These are match and incentive programs that you may be eligible for. And finally, we'll discuss very briefly the proposal reviewing and scoring process and basically what happens when you submit that proposal. What are the next steps that the agencies are going to take to score your proposal? So the problem that most of you are facing is that your R&D company or your company to be, if you're not yet started up, requires funding, right? Lots of funding is needed to cover many expenses that you're going to have. So expense buckets can include employee salaries. And that can be business employees, that can be R&D focused employees, it can be administrative staff salaries, etc. So you've got a lot of human resource salary buckets that you need to fill with dollars. We'll talk about facilities, right? You are likely going to need some level of facilities to carry out the research and development that you're focused on. You're going to need some business, some office facilities. You'll likely need some equipment, whether that be laboratory supplies, it could be computer equipment, it could be software, etc. You are likely going to incur some patent / legal expenses. So protecting intellectual property that comes from the work that you do, the R&D that you complete. How are you going to patent that, and how are you going to cover the cost of that? Business development expenditures, right? You need to go out and do market research. You need to go out and do customer discovery. How are you going to pay for that? Marketing and sales, right? Those are kind of later stage expenses that you're going to have, but you still need to have a good understanding of where's the funding going to come for those activities. And then of course, overhead, right? You got to keep the lights on. You have to pay the internet bill. You have to pay the phone bill. How are you going to cover those? So all businesses have, lots of expenses, but R&D focused companies do have some unique expenses. And we're going to talk about how you can identify sources of funding to help cover these expenses. Kind of the funding options that you can look at as an R&D company are, what we call stage specific. There's kind of a funding food chain of funding options that you can look at to help fund those expenses that we just talked about, depending on the stage of development that your R&D is in. So all companies start in what we call pre-venture. That is, you're perhaps not yet incorporated, perhaps you haven't started any, in-depth research and development yet. A lot of companies will bootstrap. Bootstrap means you're covering expenditures out of your own pocket, right? You're opening your wallet, getting the cash out, getting your credit cards out, and funding it yourselves. There's also the opportunity to utilize friends and family to bring in some dollars to help fund expenditures. When you get to the startup phase, right, you're now incorporated, you now have some significant research and development activities that you're going to embark upon. Your options for funding tend to grow at that point. Of course, you can continue to bootstrap, you can continue to go to friends and family, but some new options arise. And those are research and development grants and contracts, which is what SBIR and STTR are part of. We'll discuss those, of course. And also the opportunity could come into play where you are eligible to look at equity funding through angel investors, venture capitalists, etc. There's also resources called bridge loans. A great source of bridge loans in North Carolina for more life sciences companies is through the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. And then some incubators also have some funding available. Early stage companies are those that are in deep with the research and development that they're doing. Again, research and development grants and contracts, great tool. Angel investors, venture investors, and loans can also come into play. So as you can see, depending on the stage of business that you're in, or the startup, pre-venture, startup, early stage, different funding options can come into play depending on stage. So enter the SBIR and STTR programs, also co-branded as America's Seed Fund. These programs are extremely important, especially for these early stage R&D focused companies, of which many of you are. A description of the program is as follows. SBIR and STTR are non-dilutive federal funding mechanisms to help small businesses develop and commercialize innovative solutions to existing problems that the federal agencies are interested in, and presents a significant market potential. So the bolded underlined words are the unique features of the SBIR and STTR programs. They're unique from the standpoint that most other government funding mechanisms are not defined with these terms. First, it's non-dilutive. Non-dilutive means the funding that you receive doesn't have to be paid back. Second, it's for small businesses. Now, you can be up to 500 people in size and still be considered a small business, but it's for true small businesses to commercialize innovative solutions. Okay, commercialization of innovative solutions means the R&D that you conduct will ultimately be commercialized. It will ultimately be rolled out into the marketplace. And the agencies are interested in products that you're going to commercialize that you can show has significant market potential. Okay, so what is the small business? Again, we mentioned that it can be up to 500 people in size, but it's the small business that is going to be the proposal submitter and the awardee or recipient of phase 1 and phase 2 SBIR funds. The small business has to be for profit, so it cannot be a nonprofit or a not-for-profit. It has to be at least 51% owned by individuals. So that means the company cannot be majority owned by a large corporation, can't be majority owned in most cases by a large venture capital organization. So there are some nuances to that, but they do want to keep this truly for small companies. Now, interesting fact is that over 50% of awards are made to companies with under 10 people in size. So it is truly the small of the small that are taking most advantage of this mechanism. Now, you can imagine that a company with 498 people, while they would still be eligible for the SBIR programs, they probably have some other funding mechanisms that they can draw from internally. And SBIR is a little bit perhaps too cumbersome for them to be dealing with still. So, you know, the ultimate goal of this program is to help get you through and grow up so that you don't need this type of funding anymore. So some specifics about the SBIR program. Federal agencies with research and development budgets exceeding $100 million a year are required to participate in the SBIR program. And that participation is a certain percent set aside that they must make. And that set aside is just under 4% of that extramural R&D funding per year. There are 11 federal agencies that are required to participate in the program, and that set aside across all of those 11 agencies equates to about $3.2 billion this year. Over $20 billion through about 70,000 unique awards have been made since the program started back in 1983. The program has had a significant economic development success simply in terms of employment growth. Over 1.5 million people are employed with companies that have either received SBIRs in the past or are current recipients. So a lot of people, a lot of technically minded people are employed with these types of companies. And also interestingly, companies that have received SBIRs in the past are about 1 in 9 times likely to receive or go on to attract equity funding. So a 1 in 9 ratio of competitiveness to go on to attract equity financing is very, very important to note. The ratio of success when you're looking at globally, when you take SBIR out of the picture, the rate of success to attract equity financing is more like 1 in 100 or maybe even 1 in 500. So the fact that companies that have received this early stage government funding shows you that equity funders are much more likely to look at you as a fundable entity. And the reason for that is because SBIR has provided you the funds to get your technology to a point where it is attractive, where you've worked out the bugs, you've shown that it works, right? You've de-risked the technology appropriately. And those equity financiers are much more likely to come in at that point with follow-on funding. The sister program to SBIR is STTR, Small Business Technology Transfer. So we call that a sister program to SBIR. And that program is, although very similar to SBIR, there are a couple of key differences. STTR facilitates a cooperative research and development agreement between a small business and a US-based research institution, which in most cases you would consider that a university. Okay, so the program facilitates a contract between the small business awardee and a university research partner. Now, there are only 5 agencies that participate in SBI and STTR versus 11 in SBIR. And the reason for that is because only agencies that have over $1 billion per year in extramural R&D funding are required to participate. And those 5 agencies' participation revolves around them putting about 0.5% of that extramural R&D budget into the STTR pool. And that equates to about $450 million a year. So you've got SBIR about $3.5+ billion, STTR $450 million. You know, STTR is about 1/10 of the size, but keep in mind that the win rates or the competitiveness between the 2 programs is very similar. Here's a rundown of the federal agencies that participate in both the SBIR and STTR programs. So on the left side of your screen, you can see the 5 of the largest funded R&D focused federal agencies. We've got Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, Department of Energy, NASA, and NSF. The agencies on the right of your screen are the smallest of the 11 agencies, and they only participate in the SBIR program. And those are EPA, USDA, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, and Department of Education. Now, it's very important for you to walk away from this presentation without assumptions about what an agency funds or what their interests are simply based on its name. For example, National Science Foundation has an extremely wide array of technology development interests. They don't just focus on, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 different types of scientific endeavors. Department of Defense, another great example. They have areas of interest from engineering to biotech to pharmaceuticals to medical devices. You name it, there's probably somewhere within DoD that they have an interest in something or other. So don't judge an agency just by its name. Keep an open mind as you're starting to figure out where is the best home for my proposal to be submitted to. Okay, what we suggest as business counselors at the SBTDC when we work with tech companies is to start with the end in mind. The end being, what is the end product or the end service that you are hoping to create? Okay, so knowing what that end product is or that end service is that you're trying to develop, it's easier to move backwards as opposed to suggesting that we're big fans. We love doing XYZ research, and we're going to do this research, and hopefully some sort of product or something will come out of it that we can sell. That is not the way to be looking at this program. It is, let's define a market need. Let's define what the product is going to be that solves or fulfills that need, and then step back to where we are today to say, where can we start to fund this R&D initiative? So again, end goal is commercialization of that product that you develop. Okay, commercialization means rolling that product out, marketing it, getting it into the hands of users, and guess what? Getting a check, getting revenue from those end users or buyers, and that will then help to fund your company going forward. That is the federal agency's ultimate motivation behind these programs, is that you and your business get to the point where you can commercialize, generate revenue, and you will then not be dependent upon SBIR and STTR going forward. Okay, so again, that end goal, novel, innovative product or solution, and it's up to you to sell to that agency that that product or service has a significant market, has a significant agency fit, and it has some public need that it's going to be meeting. Okay, so both the SBIR and STTR programs are broken into 3 phases. Phase 1 is focused on feasibility testing or concept development. So over a 6-month period of time, you would be provided between $150,000 and $250,000, and those numbers are based on different agencies' maximum award amounts. You will carry out a feasibility type study. Award rates for phase 1s generally are in the range of about 15 to 20%. Now, a lot of people will ask, what does a feasibility study look like? What does feasibility mean? Well, there's no clear answer to that, and that's because each different type of technology area that all of you are interested in developing is going to have a different definition of what does feasibility mean. So it's really dependent upon also how much work, how much preliminary data, preliminary research and development have you done so far, so that you can then build upon that data or work that you've done in the past to further test it and further get it to something that you can show actually works. It solves a problem. If you're successful in getting to phase 1, proving feasibility, you're eligible to submit a phase 2 proposal. And that phase 2 proposal is going to incorporate both a research and development plan, as was part of phase 1, but it also requires that you incorporate a commercialization plan. And that commercialization plan, in essence, is a business plan devoted to the product that you are developing. Now, phase 2s generally revolve around the type of work that you would consider prototype development, field testing, beta testing, working the bugs out, so that after you've done kind of your, say, benchtop research or in-house research in phase 1, now in this phase 2, you're able to get it out. You're able to get it tested out in the field. Phase 2s are generally about 24 months in time, and funding is about $1 million to $1.5 million. Award rates are about 35 to 40%. These award rates in phase 2 look much more nicer than the lower award rates in phase 1. And the reason for that is because you've weeded out a lot of the competition that perhaps was not able to either secure the phase 1 in the first place, or they weren't able to collect strong enough data that supported feasibility. So you have far fewer applicants to phase 2, and that's why the award rate tends to go up. So about 30 to 40%. Phase 3, the federal agencies oftentimes will step out of the way in terms of their funding. And it's up to you to go out to those other sources of capital that we mentioned earlier. It could be bridge loans, it could be equity investors, et cetera. And it's up to you to further develop that product if further R&D is needed, or if you're at the stage where you're kind of sales ready, you can start to push that out, hire a sales team, et cetera. So there is no SBIR funding in most cases for phase 3 activities. But there is, obviously other sources of funding in that funding food chain. Now, NIH does offer what they call a fast track and a direct to phase 2 option. Fast track is simply a method where you submit both a phase 1 and a phase 2 proposal at the same time. And that entire package is reviewed by the reviewers. A direct to phase 2 at NIH offers you the opportunity to completely skip or bypass the phase 1 proposal. So if you are in a position where you have some very strong preliminary data that you've used other funding sources to carry out that work, you might be in a position to say that you're now at a stage where you're in kind of prototype development or more beta testing. You've already proven feasibility, and then you can simply go on to phase 2. I'll say that phase 2 is really where you want to get to, right? That's kind of the holy grail here. In a phase 1, $150,000, $250,000, not a lot of money when you're talking R&D, and not a lot of time, right? But phase 2, you are provided a significant amount of time, 24 months and $1 million plus. Okay, so phase 1s are really your ticket into the much bigger dollars available in phase 2. Now, there are 2 schools of agencies. There are contract agencies and grant agencies. Contract agencies, a good example of that is the Department of Defense. Contract agencies are very specific in terms of what their protocols are, what their requirements are. They have very highly focused topics that they want you to engage with them in your research. They generally have a procurement mechanism. What that means is that oftentimes the R&D that you carry out that leads to a product, that agency is likely going to be a potential buyer or user of your technology. So they'll often procure what you develop. They have some significantly more fiscal requirements that you have to follow. You're invoiced on progress. And examples again are DoD, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, EPA, and DOT. On the other side of the house, we have grant agencies. Grant agencies often will have areas of interest that they call investigator initiated. Okay, they are enabling you, the investigator or the proposer, to suggest areas of interest that you think would be a good fit for their agency to fund. So they have less specified topics or solicitations. They give you a little bit more flexibility in how you do your work. It allows for upfront payment, and good examples of grant agencies are NIH, NSF, DOE, and USDA. So as you're thinking about or identifying which are the agencies that could be a good fit with your funding needs, be cognizant of whether they are a contract agency or grant agency. Here's a breakdown of that, $3+ billion in SBIR and $450 million in STTR. As you can see, the Department of Defense secures or provides almost half of the SBIR and STTR budgets. And that simply means that they have the largest extramural R&D budget across all of the agencies. Coming in second is Health and Human Services, of which NIH is a large component. They put in just over $1 billion. Department of Energy comes in third with $308 million, NSF $212 million, NASA $183 million, all the way down to Department of or EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, that only has a minuscule budget of $3.6 million. So this just goes to show you where the U.S. government and through these agencies have put their efforts towards research and development. Okay, whether you agree with that or not, these are the numbers that we have to work with. Now, solicitation searching. If you are new to this program and you're just now getting familiar with what these acronyms mean, the solicitation search process is kind of like going to the grocery store and trying to figure out what ice cream flavor and what ice cream brand you want to take home with you. It's not an easy task if you're an ice cream lover. We offer what we call a kind of a three-step process in terms of trying to figure out which agency and which solicitation is a good fit for your business development strategies or your technology development strategies. Step number one is to review the solicitations that are available at each agency. And we'll talk about each of these three steps momentarily. Step number two is to search previous awards. Searching previous awards can give you a lot of good insight as to where potential future opportunities could be. And number three, you must take advantage of the opportunity to communicate with the agencies. Now, tip, don't skip this homework. You have to do the homework, right? Nobody likes homework. But these are very, very important steps to help increase your competitiveness against all of the other competition that you're going to be up against when you submit a proposal. All right, step number one, let's talk about solicitation searching. There's a terrific website called SBIR.gov. A lot of great information in the site, but here we're going to talk about searching for solicitations. So on the left side of the SBIR.gov screen, you'll see under the I believe it's under the funding tab at the top of the screen, you'll see options to search for open, future, and closed solicitations. So you'll do a click on those. You'll type in keywords for what the technology is that you're looking to be funded for, and it will bring up a laundry list of potentially matching solicitations. Now you're going to find, that 99% of the solicitations aren't going to be a match with what you're interested in, but this is sort of like finding the needle in the haystack, right? This is purely step number one, and you have to go through this process. You can then also visit agency-specific sites. So if you're saying that, we have a new engineering-based coating that we believe could be used for aircraft, well, who would be interested in that? Perhaps Department of Transportation, perhaps Department of Defense, and within that, the Air Force, right? Or if you've got a medical device that is going to be something that's implantable into the human body, who would be interested in that? National Institutes of Health, Department of Defense, perhaps National Science Foundation. So as you start to kind of go through the process, you'll narrow down the 11 agencies and which could be a good fit for you. And you can then go to each agency's websites. The link at the bottom of the screen will give you a list of all of the agencies and their respective websites. Each of the 11 agencies, they all follow different solicitation release dates and proposal submission dates, which, when you look at all of them on, in one table or one page, it looks like an absolute mess. However, you're going to be in a position, having done those previous homework steps, to narrow down your focus to maybe 2 agencies. And you'll then want to keep track of those 2 agencies' solicitation release dates and proposal submission dates. So you put those on your calendar and plan for them accordingly. Solicitations may or may not change from one release that an agency does to another. For example, National Institutes of Health publishes solicitations once a year. They come out in June, and those solicitations will not change for the entire year. You have 3 proposal submission deadlines in September, January, and April. You're eligible to submit for any of those 3 deadlines for any of the solicitations that are released in that June period. And you'll find that solicitations that were released last June are probably going to be very similar to what were released, coming up in the next June release this year. So not a lot of change from one year to another. Department of Defense, on the other hand, they do change their solicitations drastically from one release to another. So they've got 5 solicitation releases, each associated with one submission deadline, and their solicitations will change completely from one release to the next. All right, also of note, National Science Foundation and Department of Education, Department of Energy, require what they call either a pitch or a letter of intent. So if you find that NSF or DOE might be a home for your proposal to be submitted to, prior to submission of your phase 1 proposal, they require you to submit a preliminary document. NSF calls it a pitch. DOE calls it a letter of intent. They'll review that and get back with you as to whether they think it's a good fit for their agency. And if you get the go-ahead, you can then proceed to submit a proposal. The other agencies, as of right now, do not have that pre-proposal requirement. Final note, Department of Defense has what they call a pre-solicitation period. They release, again, 5 different buckets of solicitations each year. And the first release that they make is called a pre-solicitation. It's a kind of a general overview of what they're interested in from one solicitation to the next. And during the 4 to 5 week period when that pre-solicitation is available, you have the opportunity to communicate directly with DoD. Once that window closes, the full-blown detailed solicitation is released, and you don't have the opportunity to communicate with them directly one-on-one anymore. Okay. So you can see that there's a lot of differences between all of the agencies, but you don't have to become experts in all 11 agencies by any means. What we're suggesting is that you narrow the agencies down, you find the 2, 3 max that really fit with what your interests are, and then you become experts in those particular agencies. All right, next step, award history, okay? Another big piece of your pre-proposal homework. We talked about SBIR.gov. That site also offers you the ability to very quickly and easily, by keyword, search for companies that have been awarded phase 1s and phase 2s based on that keyword. So you may want to, change up your keywords, 10, 15 times. biomedical device, implantable, XYZ, software that does XYZ. And what this is going to do is going to show you results on all companies that have been awarded phase 1s and phase 2s that met your search criteria. It will show you the actual abstract, the 500-word or so synopsis of what their phase 1 or phase 2 project was focused on. It will show you the agency that funded it, the funding amount that they received. It actually shows the company name and their contact information, as well as the history of all awards that has been made to that company. Right, so that's pretty insightful information that you can use to your benefit. Now, on one hand, you could say that the awarded companies are your competition. That could be true, but also consider that these companies could be potential partners for you. Okay, so keep that option in mind as well. And final pre-proposal homework step is you must take the opportunity to communicate directly with the agency. You've got to look at the agency as the customer of a proposal that you're going to submit, right? The agency is the one that needs to buy into the quality of your proposal, right? So, of course, if you're out there selling a product, you want to understand what the customer needs and what the customer wants and how much the customer is willing to spend. So definitely take the opportunity to connect with the program manager. As you're reviewing the solicitations that the agencies make available, the solicitations will most likely provide you a point of contact at the agency who is considered the program manager. Okay, you'll want to connect with them to really discuss the fit with what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. What they like oftentimes is that you provide them with a brief synopsis of what you're trying to accomplish. Kind of an overview of what the problem is that you're trying to solve, what is the product that you're looking to solve that problem with, and what the research and development is that you would like their agency to fund. Okay, and they can then have a frank talk with you about, is this a fit with their agency or is it not? Okay, so great conversation to have. Again, we talked about some agencies do have that requirement, the pitch and the letter of intent at NSF and DOE. Personally, I am a big fan of that type of methodology. From your standpoint, the small business, writing a 5-page pitch is going to be a lot simpler than writing a whole proposal. That pitch is going to give you and the agency a good understanding of whether this is a fit with what they're interested in. Whereas if you didn't submit a pitch and you spent a whole boatload of time writing a great proposal and it just wasn't the right match with the agency, you just wasted a lot of time. Whereas the pitch, right, you invest a little bit of time, the agency gives you the go or no go, and you're in good shape. Let's talk about, is your company a one-trick pony? Okay, let's hope not. One-trick ponies are one product, one revenue stream. If that research and development toward producing that one product bombs, there goes your company. It's done. There is no other next step for it, right? Whereas if you have a multi-product strategy, meaning let's think about different commercial pathways for a few different innovative research projects that would be going on simultaneously, that potentially could lead to multiple revenue generating products, right? So greater revenue potential with a multi-product strategy. And of course, the more innovative products that you develop, perhaps the more intellectual property that you're able to secure. And that, of course, is going to then end up leading your business to have a higher enterprise value, right? A higher equity value associated with it. So we like to suggest that you think about various different fundable chunks that you can then link with different solicitations at either the same agency or different agencies. Okay. So as I was just mentioning, I tend to call it siloing of your R&D interests, so that you say, okay, we've got a software that we're developing some new code around, and we feel that this could be beneficial in a healthcare setting. We also feel that it could be beneficial in perhaps the education setting, and we would like to use this code that we're developing to test the feasibility in these various different environments or various different customer needs. So you could say, let's identify a source of funding within SBIR and STTR that fits a need within NIH, right, for the healthcare setting. And let's also try to find an area of need at the Department of Education for the education setting, right? So you could plug into your strategy using SBIR and STTR from either the same agencies over and over again or different agencies over and over again. And the goal here is to be transparent, so that when you submit one proposal to one agency, you could say that this work that we're conducting in this proposal is of great interest to NSF or whatever the agency is. We're also working to develop a kind of an alternative product that is going to fit a completely different need, and we're also looking for funding from this other agency as well. So just be transparent. I'll also note that although it is of great benefit to be able to submit multiple proposals to different agencies or the same agencies and get funded for doing different work, make sure that you are not overlapping in terms of the work that you're doing from one proposal to the next. Okay? You cannot get funded twice for doing the same type of work. Okay? So here's a kind of a pictorial view of what I was just suggesting. If the work that you're doing is what you would consider a platform technology from which multiple different products can shoot off of. Here we've got a platform technology that's got 4 different potential product lines associated with it. In the case of product 1, you've identified that National Institutes of Health, NIH, is a funder for that. You submit a phase 1 to NIH and you get a phase 1 for $250,000. Product 2, you get a NSF phase 1 for $250,000. Product 3, NIH, another phase 1 for $250,000. And product 4, DoD, you get a phase 1 for $150,000. Okay, so you've got a lot of work going on simultaneously. And it doesn't have to be that all of this work is done simultaneously. You can kind of stretch them out, from one year to the next, so that you're working on one project and then another one starts and then another one starts, etc. okay? In product number one, your feasibility study doesn't pan out and you were not eligible to submit a phase 2 proposal. So your funding ended for product number one as it relates to SBIR. Product 2, you were able to move on to phase 2 and you got a phase 2 for $1.5 million. Product 3, feasibility worked out in phase 1, you move on to phase 2. And product 4, well, feasibility didn't work out at DoD and that project ended. And then you move on after the completion of phase 2 at NSF and NIH. Maybe you need some equity funding, so you go out and secure funding through that source, and then off to the races you are, pushing your product out the door. So bottom line here is that use the SBIR program multiple times over. This is not a program to be just used one time. If you look at the companies that have been very, very successful in North Carolina in terms of product development, product offerings, they are the ones that use SBIR quite frequently. Now, you don't want to become a company of which there are a number across the country that do live off SBIRs, and none of their products really ever do great in commercialization. You don't want to become that company where you're dependent upon SBIR just to stay alive. You want to use it for its best case use scenario, and then you move on to the next source. All right, let's talk about budget. The maximum amount that you can request for a phase 1 and a phase 2 is different from one agency to another, and they can also be dependent upon from one solicitation to another. So of course, reading the directions is going to be key to figure out what is that maximum amount that you can request. You should always request the maximum. They don't give you extra brownie points for requesting less. For example, NIH, 250,000. They're not going to look at you any differently if you ask for 198,000, right? Always ask for the max. Your budget is going to be broken into 3 parts: direct costs, indirect costs, and a fee. Let's talk about the fee first. The fee is a 7% off the top of your award maximum. That can be allocated to funding things like intellectual property protection, or paying for accounting services, etc. Okay. The fee is also considered a profit margin, right? So the government is looking at you as being a true small business. You're a for-profit business, and they want to give you this profit. And of course, this profit does have the opportunity, does give you the ability to pay for things that aren't research and development related, right? Where the direct costs and indirect costs are going to come in. Always request the fee. Again, don't think that if you don't request it, they're going to look at you any more positively. They actually think the opposite. If you don't request the fee, they're going to say, "Ooh, why did these guys not request a fee?" So always request it. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are those that can be incurred whether you get the SBIR project or not, right? Utilities, you're always going to have utility bills. You're always going to have rent bills. So the indirect costs can help cover those. Generally 20 to 40% of the total that you request. So in the example of NIH, 20 to 40% of your 250 can go toward covering indirect costs. And the agency will ultimately work with you to negotiate what your true percentage rate is that you can then use going forward. Direct costs are things like salaries, supplies, equipment that are directly associated with the research and development that you're doing in your phase 1 or your phase 2. Okay, so you can cover the salaries of all of the people that are conducting work on the behalf of the phase 1. You can cover supplies, equipment, etc. Now, Very important information here. North Carolina, through the North Carolina Department of Commerce, and within that, the Board of Science, Technology, and Innovation, has a program called the One North Carolina Small Business Program. This program consists of two parts, the incentive and the match. Okay. The One North Carolina Small Business Program started back in 2006 or 2007. Historically, it's been funded on an annual basis. So the state legislature, as they develop their state budget from one year to the next, decide whether there is adequate funding to fund this particular program. So over the course of the last 15 years, the program has been funded some years and not others. This fiscal year, the program was funded, and going forward into next year, the program is also funded, which is terrific. 2 years straight, it'll be funded. Two programs, incentive. The incentive program is funding to help you, the small business, cover the costs of proposal development and submission. So if you say that you internally spent X number of hours and you used some administrative support to develop your proposal, you did market research, blah, 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 you can get reimbursed for some of that cost. Or if you use an outside consultant, some of that cost can be recovered as well. Now, up to $6,000 can be covered or reimbursed to you if you are in a Tier 3 county. And a Tier 3 county is an economically advantaged county in North Carolina. And there's a map. If you need access to what this map is, I can send that to you of what the tier-based county system looks like. If you're located in a Tier 1 and 2 county, those that are not as economically advantaged, you're eligible to receive up to $12,000 to cover the cost of proposal development and submission. Now, your ticket to apply for this is the proposal submission letter that you receive from the agency acknowledging that they received your proposal. Okay. You can be awarded one of these incentives per year, up to a total of 2 incentives over the life of the company. So if you have received 2 incentives prior, when the funding was there for that program, you wouldn't be eligible for another incentive. But if you're brand new to this program and you're interested in submitting a proposal, the fiscal year for this program goes through June 30th. So if you submit a proposal between now and June 30th, and you dot all your I's and cross your T's, follow the other eligibility criteria at the link at the bottom of the screen, you'll be eligible to get some of that expenditure reimbursed. The second and more important part of this program is the match segment. Companies that are based in North Carolina, that are headquartered here and conduct their business here, are eligible to receive up to a $75,000 match for when they receive their Phase 1 award notification letter. Okay, this is non-dilutive funding. It is funding to help you basically fill gaps, fill voids in your funding food chain that SBIR isn't adequately covering. So if you need additional, need to bring on additional staff, or you need to buy additional equipment that wasn't covered in the SBIR STTR budget, you can use it for this. You can put it in the bank for a rainy day when you feel that you're really going to hit a valley of death and that you're going to need some extra funding. So great money. There's a total of $4 million in this match, a total of $1 million in the incentive program for this year. You can receive 1 match per year, up to a total of 2 over the life of the company. And yeah, I think that does it. That just about does it. If you're interested in learning much more details about this, we hosted an event with John Harden and Dave Kaiser, who oversee this program recently. Email me, I'd be happy to send you a link to that recording. Some additional kind of icing on the cake type budget that the federal agencies also offer is through a program called TABA, and this is Technical and Business Assistance. That's what TABA stands for. It is funding that the agencies provide in addition often to the maximum allowable request that you can make from the agency. For phase ones, the maximum that you can request is up to $6,500. And this is, again, agency dependent. Some agencies have a little bit less than that. Phase twos provide up to $50,000. And there are lots of different, lots of agency specific differences between funding amounts, how you can use the money, when you request it, et cetera. But this is a mandated program that the SBA has sent down to the agencies that they must use a portion of their SBIR and STTR money to help you, the small business, fund activities that are commercialization planning oriented. In most cases, companies will use a third-party vendor to carry out market research, carry out voice of customer analysis, help them draft their phase two commercialization plan, and that's where this money comes into play. So again, more non-dilutive capital to help you get through the expense buckets that you're going to incur. So in closing here, SBIR and STTR is going to help you cover the costs of the R&D employees that are directly associated with your phase one or phase two project. It's going to help cover supplies, equipment, overhead, and then the match and TABA funds can come in and help with the commercialization side of things, perhaps some marketing and sales strategies, patents, legal, business development. Okay, so it's kind of a patchwork of funding mechanisms. A lot of money out there, and we want you to take full advantage of all of these opportunities. Now, before we close here, we'll just mention that the proposal reviewers of your proposals are likely going to come from 3 different pools. There's likely going to be a good number of academic type experts, people that are very learned in the technical field that you're submitting your proposal focused on. There could be some small business or corporate scientists that are also technical experts that could be on the review committees, as well as perhaps one reviewer of your proposal that's going to be more focused on the business development expertise side. And they'll be looking very closely at what's the market need of your product. Have you clearly explained that? What is the commercial potential? Do you understand that? Do you understand where you're going with this product? We've heard from many people that have been successful with SBIRs over the years that they are actually reviewers. So if you feel that you're a strong technical expert in a certain area, could be a great opportunity for you to learn the ins and outs of this program just by being a reviewer of proposals. So great thing to look at. And then finally, the review criteria that the agencies are going to be scoring your proposal on are these 5. We're not going to cover these 5 because that would be definitely another topic for us. But significance, innovation, approach, team, and environment. These are 5 separately scored areas that the reviewers are going to be focused on very significantly. And we at the SBTDC are here to guide you through all of the things that we've talked about today, all of the review criteria. We're here to review proposals as you're developing them prior to submission, and we're here to strategize with you about that multi-product, multi-submission strategy. Most of our services are no charge. We're completely confidential. We work one-on-one with you. We're happy to have a follow-up meeting with anybody, based in North Carolina that would like to talk one-on-one with us. Here's our team's contact information. Again, I'm John Uveri. My email address is SBIR@SBTDC. Director of our team, Nicole Schwerbrock, Rachel Burton. She's located here in Chapel Hill along with me. And Brian Dentz, he's located in our Western region in Hickory and Charlotte. So we've got a great team. We're happy to work with you. Our goal is to help you be more competitive when you go out and try to submit a proposal. And our win, your win at the end of the day, is our win from an economic development standpoint. We want more of these dollars coming into North Carolina. We want you to be competitive when you're going out to raise that capital and become a strong business with strong economic development potential. So we will open it up to questions and answers. I'm sure Nicole has been in the background answering questions.
Yes, hi everyone. Hi, John. Yeah. Great job as always. There were a couple of questions that I answered, but I left one up, particularly number 2 was of interest, that although I answered, maybe you can give some more information to this.
Okay, which question was it? I see it up here.
And you mentioned this, but can we submit multiple phase 1 pitches, letters of intent, submitted to the same agency, NSF or DoD, for different R&D projects within the same company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So NSF only allows one proposal to be submitted per round of submissions. So NSF has quarterly submission dates, and potentially you could submit a pitch, one pitch in each of those different rounds. I wouldn't submit 2 pitches per round, because you can only submit 1 proposal per round. NIH, on the other hand, you can submit, a handful of proposals, at each deadline or across multiple deadlines.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, as you're thinking about additional questions, I'll also mention that it's a great idea to really be thinking about the team. That's when we first start working with clients that are just new to this process. The team is often one of the weak components. Of course, that's the case because you don't have a team yet, because you're just starting out. But we often suggest that you really strategize around who do you think you're going to need from both a technical and a business development standpoint, going on from, into year 1, year 2, year 3, and start to map out who those people might be, how you plan to go about recruiting them, and how each of these funding mechanisms can help fund the work that they'll be doing for you. So team can be a very time-consuming process. Team development can be a time-consuming process, so it's really important for you to start thinking about that early, in addition to all of the other things that we talked about that are SBIR specific. Let's see, a couple of questions came up. We have been invited to submit a NSF phase 1. Does SBTDC offer services to review our proposal prior to us submitting? Yes, we're happy to do that. We do request that you let us know when you're going to be submitting that proposal to us, just so that we can put that into the queue and make sure that one of our team members has bandwidth to review it, and also be sure that you're sending it to us at least 2 weeks before the submission deadline. That will give us time to review it, and then of course you time to actually act on our comments. But yes, that's one of the services that we do provide. So a couple of questions about DOT and who do we contact, or do they have particular interests? Your best place to go for that is directly to the DOT SBIR webpage. They're going to be, kind of clearly identifying what their solicitations are and who their program officer is for you to reach out to. Let's see, do all states have SBTDC-like programs? I'm located out of North Carolina. Great question as well. For those of you who are not located in North Carolina, you of course would not be eligible to work with the SBTDC directly. We're more than happy to have you on today to educate you. But every state has a small business development center, an SBDC. Some SBDCs like ours have a devoted team called a tech commercialization team, and those are SBTDCs. Outside of the Small Business Development Center network, there could also be other resources that focus on SBIR. So in Pennsylvania, I know for a fact that the Ben Franklin Center is a terrific resource. You can look up Pennsylvania SBIR support services, and I'm sure Ben Franklin and Kelly Wylam's name will come right up. So don't hesitate to reach out. They've got a terrific program there. Another question, for phase one, are there any tips for a feasibility study that can be part of a compelling submission if the startup is an idea stage? Again, phase one feasibility study is really going to be dependent upon what is the work that you have done so far. What is the preliminary data that you've collected so far that you need to now build upon to successfully move to the next stage of research and development? Again, as I mentioned before, if you have conducted a significant amount of preliminary work and you feel that you're in a position where you've already proven feasibility, you might be able to move on to a direct to phase two. If you're a health science oriented technology. But that'll be a great question. We're happy to chat with you about where you are and how you might be able to structure what you would consider a phase one. Next question, can we apply for phase one after today? Well, certainly apply for it at any time, depending on when the solicitation deadline is or proposal submission deadline is for your agency. One more question came up. If you receive a phase one award, but in developing and testing the feasibility of an idea, you realize the idea needs to be tweaked or you need to head back to the drawing board, can you reapply for a phase one award? Yeah, absolutely, great question. Phase ones fund high-risk research, and the agencies are very, very adept or familiar with that concept. That's what they want to see is high-risk research that is likely to not pan out, right? There's no guarantee of success. So on that note, that's why a lot of phase ones fail from an R&D standpoint. So yes, your strategy of going back to the drawing board, revamping, kind of testing a different approach could lead you to resubmit a different or a new phase one proposal. So yes, that is good strategy, and it's also within your proposal is when you submit it, it is good to also incorporate alternative approaches. So if you're suggesting that we're going to do X, Y, and Z scientific steps, and these are all high-risk scientific steps, and step number 2 fails, right? Does that then lead you to say, well, my project's over, right? In which case, the reviewers want to see that you can suggest some alternative approaches if one of the steps does fail. Okay, so that also, your comment made me think about that as well. All right. So with that, we are a little bit over time. I knew we probably would be, given the number of things that we had to discuss, but glad the rest of you could hang out through the end with us. And feel free to reach out anytime if you're based in North Carolina. We're happy to connect. All right. Have a great afternoon, and we'll talk to you soon.